3 days with spider scientists.
Hello YouTube. Have you ever wondered how exactly arachnologists, scientists who study spiders, actually go about studying spiders? I have. How do they find them? How do they catch them? How do they identify and catalog them? Do they have super special equipment to lure spiders out of hiding? Can you do spider science at home just like the pros do? If you've ever wondered this, or if you're wondering this now that I've put the thought in your head, then you, inquisitive internet person, are in the right place. In the spring of 2025, I had the opportunity to spend a few days with a couple of scientists who actually do this, Dr. Catherine Scott and Dr. Sean McCann. These names might be familiar to you if you're a long-time viewer here. They've worked with me since the beginning of the channel, providing research resources and photos and a ton of guidance. And they gave me a first-hand look at some aspects of spider science, as well as a great introduction to one of the coolest cities I've ever had the chance to visit. Now, I'm a ways from Halifax, so challenge number one was getting to the airport, which involved a cab ride to a bus station for a 3-hour bus ride across Nova Scotia. It was nice to be able to actually soak in the views, since I'm normally driving when I do this trip. And finally, I arrived at another bus station in a back alley in Dartmouth.
Well, I'm in this back alley that is the Maritime Bus Terminal in Dartmouth, and I'm stuck here for the better part of the next hour, so may as well look for spiders. I'll start by looking along this wall. Surely there's got to be something. And isopod. I realize I'm not exactly selling Dartmouth as a beautiful place here. It really is much nicer than what you're seeing. I just happen to be in an alley. For instance, let's have a look at that cool bridge over there. That's nice. I'm crossing to the other side of the alley where there's some shade here. And let's have a look through some of the vegetation here. I just pulled this leaf back and there's a silk here, but nothing in it. So something was here at some point. Well, have a look back here behind this building. Got some cracks in the cement. This is somewhat promising. Sure, there's something. Maybe if we flip some rocks. Bottom side of cardboard often has stuff. Oh, what's that? Yeah, something here. A couple of them. There's 3. Okay, so let's have a look at the one that's moving the slowest. I actually don't recognize that. Here, let's get you in as close as we can. Of course, I can't see a thing. It's very bright. There. Don't actually know what kind of spider that is.
It turned out this spider was Graminota sp, which is a kind of Erigonine linniphiid, a dwarf sheet web weaver, which isn't uncommon, just easy to overlook. That was really all I found in the hour I spent there, despite flipping rocks and scouring bushes. But after that, it was a quick bus ride to the airport, and I was on my way to where I was actually going. Sean and Catherine picked me up at the airport, and right away I could see that this small city on the edge of the Avalon Peninsula had a lot to enjoy. Our first stop was actually here, the village of Kitty Vitty, a little harbor neighborhood that also happens to have an entrance to the Sugarloaf Path, a part of the East Coast Trail, because the dogs need their walk. This is where I learned that I am not in fantastic shape. So many steps. But the view of the city is amazing from up here on the rocks, and this iceberg out in the distance was pretty nifty, so it was well worth the climb. And after that, a much-needed dinner at the Kitty Vitty Brewery. So many breweries in St. John's. It was the next morning when the sciencing began, and Catherine took me to a research site to walk me through some techniques that scientists use to determine what species occur in what areas and how many. You might find that some of these methods are surprisingly simple and low-tech, meaning there's a good chance you can do it pretty much the same way the pros do.
Okay, so yeah, this is a pitfall trap. It's got a little hat on it to keep the rain out, and the lid has these little spikes that go down to the ground to exclude things that you don't want falling into it, like small rodents and things like that. It's basically just a cup that is set into the ground so that the top is flush with the level of where your spiders and insects are crawling around. And then you fill it with a preservative. In this case, we're using ethanol. You can also use propylene glycol. It looks like we have one spider in there. If you can see that little guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as well as some kind of midge and a slug and a larva that I don't know who it is. So yeah, the idea is that when this is in the ground, any crawling arthropod that is wandering in this direction will encounter the edge and just fall in to the fluid and get killed and preserved. You can do live pitfall trapping in theory without the preservative in the bottom. The problem is you got to be checking those really regularly, because with spiders and some beetles and things that are predators, they'll just eat each other and you'll be left with one really big fat spider or beetle and nothing else. So yeah, that's like one of the basic techniques of passive trapping for crawling arthropods.
And so is this to just sort of survey what species you're encountering in this field? Or?
Right, yeah. So the idea with passive sampling is you just want to get an idea of what's available. So anything that is crawling around will fall in, and you'll get a bit of an idea of the community structure of arthropods.
Could you try this in your backyard? Yes, you could, pretty easily.
It actually says Vernon Pitfall Trap.
Yeah, so this is like a particular design of Pitfall, but it's very easy to DIY this. You can just take like, you know, a red Solo cup like that you would get for beer, dig a hole in the ground, set your cup in the ground, and Bob's your uncle.
Right. You just need some kind of little cover to keep the rain out.
Yes, you can make a like a DIY version of this from some like that like plastic version of cardboard that you can get.
Oh yeah, like corrugated plastic.
Corrugated plastic, like cut a little square. You can like throw some toothpicks around the edge or whatever as your little barrier for vertebrates. And yeah, it's like any cup in the ground is a pitfall trap. This is like a standardized version. A lot of Canadian entomologists will use these, and then you can be sure that the method that you're using for sampling is going to be consistent with other people who are using these exact same traps.
Right, that makes sense.
Like when you are doing pitfalls and there's a beetle who didn't get caught. Oh, and a spider who didn't get caught. Look at that. Oh. That's a trichosa.
Yeah, I was going to say it looks from a distance like a trichosa.
I'll let you go about your business. And that was a nice carabid who got lost. Whenever you're collecting spiders or insects, you really want to make sure that you have a label associated with your specimens as soon as possible, because it's easy to forget.
Right.
And if your specimens get separated from the information that you want to have on the label, which is where and when you collected them, they become basically useless, because you might know what it is, but you don't know where it is from or when it is from. And if you don't immediately know what it is, you often really need to know where the thing was collected to have an idea of what it might be. So when you're collecting things in ethanol, you don't want to be writing in ink that will just get washed away by the alcohol. And so what we tend to use is pencil, or there are certain inks that work that don't disappear, but pencil is great. And then you write your label and you actually put the paper directly into the ethanol. The date and the location, GPS coordinates, if you have them, are the key things that you want to have on your label. So other information that often goes on labels is like the habitat type, even like the weather conditions. Sometimes if you're collecting a live animal, you might make a note about its behavior, what it was doing when you collected it, and stuff like that. And so also the method that you use. So in this case, we were doing pitfall traps. So you would want to say on the label, pitfall trap was the method by which these things were collected.
What occurs to me is that sometimes somebody coming behind you might use this data for a purpose you never thought about.
Exactly.
And so if you have that data, it becomes useful data.
Yes, the more information, the better. And I'm learning this like in my project where I'm looking at museum specimens of a particular spider that I'm interested in, and I'm interested in the ecology of that spider. So I get really excited when the labels do have information about the habitat type or even like the plant that the spider was on, because that's something that I'm studying today, and in the places where I can go. But specimens that are in museums all across North America that have that kind of information can give me really valuable data about the ecology of the animal.
So pitfall traps are a kind of passive sampling. What about active sampling?
Active sampling is when you go around and actively collect your spiders, rather than waiting passively for them to go into a trap. One way, obviously, is to just like go and look and see if you can find them, and then pick them up. And by hand. So we sometimes call that hand collecting. Although my supervisor always points out in writing that you're not collecting hands. You are collecting by hand. Another way that is often more effective than just using your eyes is using a net. So this is a sweep net, and you just sweep it through the vegetation like so.
Just smack it.
Yep.
Okay.
And then look inside, and we'll put it on this white tray because then we might have a better idea of seeing what we've got in here. So you will get some little bits of vegetation. We're getting a lot of little midges. Probably no spiders in this particular sweep, but you get the idea. So this is like a good way to capture things that are sitting on the vegetation, that might not be super easy to pick out with your eyes alone.
Do you often end up with spiders in different kinds of vegetation?
For sure. Okay. Sweeping is an effective way to sample spiders that live on foliage, for sure.
And there's really nothing special about this net.
This is a bit of a sort of lightweight version of a sweep net. I'll show you. We've got a kind of variety of nets at home. So, kingfisher.
Look, was that it just flew away?
Yeah.
There?
Your typical sweep net will be made entirely out of material like this that can kind of withstand a bit more of a beating. Is literally beating the bushes with a stick.
Again, as simple as it sounds.
And then seeing what falls down. There is a spider. Right there.
Yeah.
And actually, I have a friend who...
it vanished.
Did it go into the pine cone?
It must have.
Another non-standard method, but that I want to point out because it's really cool, is sometimes spiders live in pine cones. And so an arachnologist in Washington did a whole study about pine cone dwelling spiders, and they describe in their paper the method, which is to give the pine cone a good thwack to get the spiders to come out, which is like a kind of miniature version of beating.
How did he spell thwack in the paper?
She spelled it, I think, yeah, THWACK.
I think, okay, so that's the standard spelling of thwack.
Yeah. Oh, there's another little, that's a little Arrhenius diadomatus. Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Nice.
What is that?
That is I am not sure. It might just be another baby orb weaver, which I know you're not as interested in.
I feel like this might be Mangora. There's another little tiny one there. So I mean, we've got, at minimum, we've got 5 spiders in this trade just from doing that.
This little branch here. So that gives you an idea of how many spiders might be living in this tree that you would have difficulty detecting just by looking. If all you've got is your net and you don't have a separate beating stick and beating sheet, you can take some foliage, sort of stick it inside your net and shake it like that as well.
You just got to sift through it a little bit more.
Oh, there's a little tiny spider.
Tiny spider right there.
Some kind of orb weaver juvenile, probably.
Yeah.
There's another one.
That one looks different.
Yeah, that might be like a...
Let me see how close I can get.
Tynid? I'm not sure. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah.
Hard to say with juveniles. They all kind of look the same.
It wouldn't take much for the average amateur to use these methods. Next, we headed out to a vacant lot in town to try another highly technical collection technique, rock flipping.
Yeah, okay. lots of rocks, which are my favorite for the technique of rock flipping, which is just what it sounds like. So there is actually a web here. This is probably a juvenile agolenid of some sort. There it is.
There it is, right down there.
Could be, I'm gonna guess it's a juvenile giant house spider. Hard to say for sure. Let's see if we can poke her back out. So this is, when you have lots of little tiny rocks like this, it's challenging if you actually want to capture the spider because it can just dive into those little crevices. Right. So it is handy to have something for sort of gently poking and prodding, like this little piece of stick. And if you do want to collect them, this group of spiders are very fast and sometimes challenging to collect, but we'll give this a try. See, yeah, she's gonna run away.
So
but
you're
you
just gonna
hold the vial in front of where she is and hope that she'll go into it, like so. Oh, almost, not quite. Go, come on. Oh, that's convenient because then I can just go like this. So yeah, she might be a hobo. Hobos tend to be paler in color, but hard to be 100% if it's not an adult.
Poke this right down. Yeah, it doesn't look particularly leggy. That could be.
Yeah, and the hobos to me are kind of a paler, all over brown, like, and on the cephalothorax, like the kind of two darker reddish brown lines, whereas the giant house spiders tend to be a more of a like dark grayish blackish markings with the chevrons on the abdomen and with the stripes on the cephalothorax sometimes. But it's really a gestalt thing, and it's like you look at enough of them and you're like, I think that's what it is. So let's put you back in your house.
For the longest time, hobos were really only recorded in the Pacific Northwest, and then I think a population popped up in Ontario. Yep. Them showing up in Newfoundland. This is a very recent development.
I think that the first one was collected at least 20 years ago.
Was it
but they're
that long
still
ago?
only
Okay.
in St. John's, really. Like, they haven't spread. But I think they have spread from the point of introduction, which was probably the port.
Okay.
Or like a warehouse or something where they were accidentally brought in on a shipment of something, and then they have gradually kind of spread throughout St. John's, certainly. Okay. Same thing for the giant house spiders, which are also introduced from Europe and showed up here.
When you look at a range map for the hobo,
yeah, they're not supposed to be here. They haven't been officially reported from here, so that's why last year I went around collecting them, and I'm planning on writing a paper just to be like, hobos and giant house spiders have both established in Newfoundland, to kind of get that into the literature. In that case, we saw a web there, so we kind of knew that there would be a spider underneath. But in general, like, there's lots of spiders that just live under rocks that aren't web builders. So just going around and picking up rocks and seeing if anyone is hanging out underneath.
Do you normally find, like, it's larger rocks that you find them under, or does it matter?
It depends, but yeah, like, larger rocks are often more likely to have spiders under them. Rocks that are sitting on top of other rocks rather than rocks that are, like, set into soil.
Okay.
Because, like, there's crevices between the rocks that are kind of permanent. Yeah, this is, like, fairly marginal habitat, but I just knew that there are agolenids here, which is why I brought
I see silk down in there, but I don't see a spider yet. Oh, wait. Is that? That's a spider, but it doesn't.
And that's not an agolenid.
No, that looks like something different.
Oh, that's a harvester. So that's not its web. That's an Apiliones. Yeah.
Oh,
that's just hanging out down there.
Look at that. Okay.
Of course, putting the rock back in such a way as to not crush what you just uncovered.
Yes, that is part of the technique. And I mean, what I tend to do is, if I pick up a rock and say there was a spider sitting right there, in order to avoid accidentally smooshing it, I will tend to, like, coax it out into a crevice or out of the footprint of the rock before I put it back.
Before you put it back,
to avoid accidental crushing.
It'll probably come back to where it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Next, we were off to another research site to check something called a malaise trap, which is a bit more technical.
This is a malaise trap, which is designed to capture primarily flying insects that will, like, fly in here, run into the black part, and then climb up, because that's what they like to do, and they'll end up getting funneled up into this tube. They'll fly around up here for a while until they get tired, and then drop into this collecting bottle that's filled with preservative, which in this case is 70% ethanol, which will both kill and preserve them.
This particular trap is a part of the North American Insect Abundance Network, which is a group of over 250 scientists in Canada and the United States looking for trends in insect populations, which we know are in decline, but we need a more detailed and nuanced understanding of the phenomenon. By using identical traps and identical methods at all sites, researchers can get a clearer picture of how populations are changing year over year.
People are sampling all of the insects to figure out what's there and how many insects are there, to get an idea of whether insect abundance and diversity, and so the relative abundance of different groups of insects, is changing over time, and how it is being affected by climate, which is changing, of course. So this project has, I think it's in its 5th year now. We've been participating in it for 3 years, and so we will have a longish term data set eventually, like where we'll have multiple years of data. So in each location, we'll know whether things are changing year over year, but also we'll get a picture of all across North America if in general the trend is for certain insect groups to be declining or stable or even increasing, which could be the case, and how that relates to things like temperature and other climate variables.
In the afternoon, we hit Signal Hill. This was more a sightseeing stop than a sciencing one, but I'm going to show you anyway because it's just plain cool. This was the site of the last battle of the 7 Years' War in 1762, and in 1901, The very first transatlantic wireless transmission was received here by Marconi, so there's a lot of history in this place. We didn't find any spiders here, but just to justify the trip here, here's a photo of a bee, an Andrinospa, that we found here. Isn't he cute? There, we scienced a little. Then we closed out the day with another trek up the Sugarloaf path before turning in for the night. The next morning, we headed out to a marshy area to see what we could find, which Diego and Zora here seemed pretty okay with. We were quite a ways off the beaten path here, so we were hoping to see some things that might be harder to find in the city. Here's Sean demonstrating his brush beating technique with the back end of his sweep net, but it was a bit early in the year to find a whole lot. Not all of the brush beating attempts were fruitless, though. This spider was a new one on me, a tiny Thuridula emertoni, which is a spider I'd love to encounter as an adult because they're apparently a pretty nifty looking little cobweb weaver. I mean, encounter an adult specimen of, not encounter when I grow up. A little running crab spider, what I think is Theridion pictum, and this black slug, Arion ater. We didn't need to brush beat for this one, he was just on the trail. Also, this is more the kind of net that's usually used in sweep netting. You can see it's very robust, and the net itself is made from linen, so it's made to be durable enough to smack vegetation like this. And it did produce some results. We came across a few of these goldenrod crab spiders, which I wouldn't have expected in this environment, and these tetranathids seemed fairly common in this marshier area, which is where we examined these pitcher plants. These are super cool. These belong to the Sarracenia genus of pitcher plants, and they're actually a carnivorous plant. They secrete a substance that attracts insects, which then slip on this rim into the pitcher, which is usually filled with water. And check out the inner surface of the pitcher. This thing is basically the sarlacc pit for insects. They fall in and get digested by the plant, and the plant's ability to prey on insects allows it to grow in nutrient-deficient soils. And check out this little hustler. He's cashed in on the attracting properties of the pitcher and made his web literally inside the pitcher plant. You sneaky little devil. The afternoon, though, would prove to be the most fruitful spider hunt of the whole trip, as we dropped off the dogs at home and headed out to a somewhat legendary place. Out on the west coast of Canada, I'd spent quite a bit of time in Clayoquot Sound. Fellow Canadian music fans will understand why it was somewhat satisfying for me then to head for the other end of the country, Cape Spear.
I am here at Cape Spear. This is the easternmost point of North America, and it is a pretty remarkable landscape, as you can see behind me here. And I'm here with Sean and Catherine. We're gonna hunt around, try to find some wolf spiders here looking out over the North Atlantic. So we'll see what we can find here.
This started off with me observing how Sean and Catherine were going about things. And again, it was low-tech solutions that were being employed here.
Yeah, got him.
Good job. So you've got one, Catherine's got one.
In habitat like this, the reason why I like to have the big cup with the big mouth is that like you can, like, if you can just kind of get it in front of them and then
just scoop.
Yeah, but like it's, you always risk it like diving down,
right?
But it's like you have a bit of a better chance.
This is a thing that a person gets better at with practice.
That one dove down into the depths.
But a lot of the time, it really is as simple as scanning the moss or the grass until you see a spider, then doing the best you can to catch it with the plastic cup from the morning's iced coffee.
They're probably looking for prey that are also out in the sun.
It was comforting to see that professionals sometimes have spiders get away from them too, not just me.
So the spider is in here, and I have this little device, which is a version of a spy pot.
Okay.
So if I can get the spider to go into this little glass tube, like so, then I can kind of, this is a soft sponge plunger, and so I can kind of get the spider stuck down at the bottom, and then I can turn it over and we can get a closer look at it to see if it's an adult. So if you've got a hand lens and you've got your spider in the bottom of your tube like this, which is glass, so it has nice optics, then you can get real close to it, look at the genitalia, and I think that this is in fact an adult female, or maybe it's a penultimate female.
There's another one on the rock right there.
It sure is. And that looks like an adult male, so let's try to capture it.
I have nothing to capture with. Not my hand anyway. Oh, well done.
So, we'll put this guy aside for a moment. John, can you hold that?
This is a pen nail.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
The wolfies we found here seem to be primarily from the Pardosa genus, with this really cool stripy one being Pardosa hyperborea. This other one we think might have been Pardosa moesta. There's something rather silly looking about Pardosa wolf spiders, with these really widely spaced headlights right here. Goofy looking little guys, really. But I do love the striking markings on this Pardosa hyperborea. Here you can see Sean using a pooter. This is a really simple but really handy spider sciencing device. It's just a length of flexible rubber tubing attached to a rigid clear tube, with a piece of fine mesh between the rigid tube and the flexible tube. And you really do just suck the spider up, and it gets caught in the mesh. Then blow it out into whatever container you've got. In this case, the spider was a jumping spider, and it took a few photos and a fair bit of digging to identify it, but eventually, using a long list of resources, we ID'd it as Citisax rainieri. Worth noting here is that it's not as if arachnologists can just look at any spider and say, oh, that's Spiderus randomi. They need to go through the keys and the flowcharts and the resources and pour through whole banks of photos and diagrams to identify some spiders too. Sean posted this observation on iNaturalist, and it's interesting to note that there are very few observations of this species this far east. At the time, the next one over was in Colorado, though a few observations in Newfoundland have been added since. But besides the spiders, Cape Spear was a simply amazing place. The next day was my last full one in St. John's, and we spent most of the day at the dining room table. The thing is, the dining room table in a house occupied by a couple of arachnologists is as much a research bench as it is a place to eat. And here Sean shared some tricks with me.
Sometimes if you put down a bit of water, you'll get he'll stop and drink.
Oh.
That works pretty well sometimes. In the meantime, you just wait for him to settle, which is sometimes will happen and sometimes won't.
And again, it was nice to see that sometimes spiders don't cooperate with the professionals either. This wolf spider did not want to stay on this rock. Then Sean walked me through some microscope work. If you've been into spiders for a while, then by now you're probably used to hearing that many species can't be identified properly without dissecting them and examining the genitalia. So that's exactly what we did. First I had a look through Sean's stereoscope at some preserved spider specimens. Then, using my own little digital microscope, I took a crack at removing the epigenum, the genital structure of a female spider, from this preserved giant house spider specimen.
Well, whether it was
I'm not going to tell you that this was easy, but I will say that it wasn't quite as hard as I expected. And again, some of the tools are surprisingly low-tech. This whole operation is basically done with a pair of watchmaker's tweezers and a homemade scalpel fashioned from a straight pin with its end ground to a flat, sharp point like a screwdriver, and the other end set into a handle so you can hang on to the thing. And by carefully working my way around, I was able to cut the epigenum out of the dead spider, well enough so that it could be used for a solid ID, despite it being the very first time I'd ever tried it.
I'm almost there. I feel like I've made. Oh,
There you go.
I feel like I've made a mess of the spider,
Yeah.
but
That's not a messy spider.
No?
No.
okay.
So these skills are absolutely within reach of the amateur. It's not rocket science. It's just regular science. The next morning, Catherine demonstrated basic litter sifting, which again is done with just a plain white dishpan. Litter sifting is another very commonly used technique in this kind of science, and just like brush beating and sweep netting, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like.
The idea with litter sampling is you just sample some litter. So we've got a white bin.
Right.
We're going to pick up some litter. Ow, ow, ow. That's a spiky plant. And throw it in here. So try not to get stabbed like I did. I got a nice slug friend on me.
The slug.
There are methods of sifting litter. I don't have a sieve that's appropriate for that, but that is a thing that you can look into. There are also methods where you can take a bunch of litter, if you're really interested in soil arthropods, and then put a light over them so that the animals all move away from the light and the heat to kind of get them to come out. So there are traps that are designed for that, but this is just a really basic, we're going to see kind of if anybody comes out of this pile of leaves. Oh, there's a spider. It's nice, got a nice bright yellow abdomen. So we're gonna hang on to that one for a minute. This is not the technique of an expert in this technique.
Right.
But as you see, it does allow you to get a look at some of the arthropods that were hanging out in the litter.
And that was sort of the end of the sciencing, as I needed to fly back to Halifax later that day. But not before I had the chance to run around downtown St. John's, which, it turns out, is a really cool place. I'll admit that driving in St. John's looks like it would be a bit of a nightmare. I'm pretty sure there isn't a right angle to be found anywhere in the streets of the city, but that really just adds to the appeal. And that afternoon, I flew out of St. John's and back to Halifax. What I came home with was not just new knowledge and skills, but also a new kind of confidence. Sure, it probably does take an actual university education and very specialized equipment to dive into research like genetics or physiology, but there's a huge chunk of science that really is done with very simple tools, used effectively and with attention to detail, and that can be done by nearly anyone. So go do some brush beating or litter sifting in your backyard. You're effectively doing a survey in much the same way that researchers would. Remember that records are golden, data is essential, and keep it organized. Submit it to iNaturalist or Bug Guide or get in touch with your local museum, and you can meaningfully contribute to our knowledge of these amazing animals. So don't be afraid to get out and try. Of course, a huge thank you to Sean and Catherine for putting me up for 3 days and for taking the time to teach me all of this. If you want to see some of the spider science I dabble in at my house, join my Patreon, where you'll get a behind-the-scenes look at the making of these videos, research notes, random spider encounters, and more exclusive content. Patreon is the very best way to support this channel and the work that I do, and I appreciate the support of my patrons so much. You folks are amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something about how you can do spider science in your house, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers. Hello, Diego. You've brought me a shoe. I think that's Sean's shoe.